Hello, vintage Nitro fans. Racing 393. A running video of my vintage previous build Kyosho Turbo Burns. It wasn't as easy as you may think. Time to take this one out. It should start. Had a bit of a dodgy bearing, but we replaced the bearing, so it should all work. I'm just waiting for things to charge up. Go over some nuts and bolts on this really, and then we'll take it out. Let's see if it will. Let's see how this late 80s Nitro performs. We've been rebuilding Nitros like this, especially the Turbo Burns, which is what this is. Bit of a mix and match, but been doing Turbo Burns for like weeks it seems. But yeah, time to take this out and see how it goes. So I'll see you when we get back out. Before you start making plans, I'd think again. So first of all, let's start off with a load of negative. But I'll be honest, it's things that anyone that owns a Nitro should know anyway. The Kyosho Turbo Burns, Stroke Burns, and that era never had, I want to make a disclaimer, which you're probably aware of anyway, never had an engine like this put in. It's just a force engine. So I bought a batch of these with buggies a while ago now, probably about a year ago. I bought the buggies just for the fact of buying one of these Asman 0.21 and 0.28 Nitros. They seemed at the time from good, like really good, and not so good condition engines. So I just took the lot. There's about, I don't know, 6 or 7, maybe more in total engines and parts. So that's my first thought. And I thought to myself, well, if I'm using the same engines, they're nice and cheap for a reason, I guess, and I've got spares. So this is the engine that I shoehorned into the Nitro Turbo Burns. Now, prior to this video, like probably again another year ago maybe, I did a video series of rebuilding this very car. And from my memory, I'll have to look at the video, but it did start. It wasn't easy, but it ran. Now, let's get on to the because I actually made it to the place where I run the car. I forgot one really important tool. I don't know how I forgot it. Is my tuning screwdriver. However, I managed to sort that out with a bit of metal that I found. Anyway, let's get on to the first main problem. Way back when I was building this chassis, I did a complete strip down. The centre diff, to the best of my knowledge, it was in good condition and it worked. I sealed it all up like I normally do. I did it with sealer though, but that didn't work. But we've changed that now. However, there was a big problem with this, which I didn't realise at the time of building. On the centre diff, if you know these cars, there's a little grub screw. That grub screw stops the pin from one of the planet wheels, I guess, that go either side. I think they're called planet wheels, I can't remember. But that stops a little pin coming out. Much to my, I remember doing it, and I probably remember saying it on the video, but for some reason back then, I thought that when you wind the diff nut in there, that little grub screw, you can actually lock the diff, which you can. Of course, doing that gives the clutch no slip because it can't turn anything. So the clutch bell itself slips. So when I started the car, it actually got running, ironically, and it was a bit of a pig to start, hence the video previous. But it ran, and I had it on because it didn't have a starter box, and I had to have the wheels off the ground, so I just pretty much shoehorned it onto a cone, like near the airport. So there was like a cone laying down, so I used that as a bit of a platform. Got it running, and it was ticking over. It actually went through a tank and a half of me starting it, so it was running. I don't know how, but it was running. But as soon as you put it on the floor, it cut because it couldn't spin the clutch up on the engine because this centre diff was pretty much locked. Now, looking back, I could have easily fixed that by undoing that grub screw, but I didn't know that at the time. So there was the first issue. Now, I spent all afternoon, about an hour and a bit there, and 20 minutes, faffing about, not realising this was the problem. I took it home, thought there was a problem with the clutch bell because it made a funny sound. But we repaired the diff, we sorted it out, resealed it, re-greased it, put the grub screw in where it should be, which led on to another issue. Yes, the clutch bell. When I was running the car, and I had it on the floor, and initially, so it was spinning the clutch. That bell was freaking hot. I didn't realise. That's when I thought back when I was running it over at the airport that there's a problem here somewhere. So when I repaired the diff, the centre diff, once I got it home, I took this apart. It's a 2-shoe clutch, aluminium. One of the pegs in the flywheel had come out, so that was rattling around in there. The spring that went round the shoes, if you like, to keep them sort of pushed in so they can spring out and go back, that'd come off. So that wasn't working, which probably, it was still turning over though, so the shoes were just coming out, so maybe they weren't going back in, which means that also could have been the issue. But ironically, even though all that was happening, it was still working somehow as a clutch. But anyway, we sorted that out. The next two issues, the roto start plate leaked, which upon investigation wasn't the roto start because there's no seal on that. It was the back plate. I think the back plate was leaking. And it may well have been through the centre shaft, which comes through where the one-way bearing is. I'm not saying it wasn't there, but there's a lot of oil and residue behind that. So as you know, you need these nitro engines to properly seal. Now, it could be one of a million things, but I'm just going through the basics at the moment. So I've put the back plate back on, cleaned it all up with some exhaust sealer around it because I don't have a gasket. Cleaned this up again, put that back on. Again, I won't know for sure until we get it running. And on to the second part of the issue in this picture. You can't quite see from the picture. However, that's the original oil seal. It looks knackered. It was split. Not much, not round where the exhaust is. However, it must have been drawing air, I would think, from the back of the exhaust when trying to run or start this engine. So I've got a new seal or a batch of seals on order because I don't have any spare. The other part, so all this added together, I don't know how the engine was running anyway, but the carburetor, I would say, was leaking. There was two things here. You can't see it in the picture there, but I've still got it and it's still on there. An aluminium fuel filter. It is old, but it it does the job. It's got a little mesh inside, which I took out, and it looked like that was blocked. It's certainly not directional, although one of the chambers in that, it's only a small, it's only really tiny. One of the chambers is bigger than the other, so I would suggest that from the tank into the carb would be a smaller chamber, and then the bigger chamber through the filter to the carb. If you see what I mean, that's the way it looks right from what I can work out. There's no arrows on it, but I cleaned the filter, which was blocked. When I took the carb off, it's got two seals on this carb, one at the top and one at the bottom. Now, I haven't got spare seals. Now, the one at the bottom has split, it's in half, but it still fits on there. It sort of seals the bottom. It's supposed to seal the bottom of where the crank is, and the top one seals the top. Now, it's been cleaned and I've put it back in. It seems all right. Now, I haven't tried it yet at the time of recording, but as you can imagine, this was rebuilt a while ago. And I say rebuilt, let's be fair, it's only been cleaned, stripped down and cleaned. But it goes to show that for nitros, any nitro engine, let alone any vintage nitro engine, it does take a lot to keep these engines in working order, which leads me on to various comments. And I'm not going to go into all this detail here because it's not about that, but there's a lot of comments scattered around the internet and YouTube about nitro engines, and lots of people, quoting, and I quote, is nitro relevant in today's RC? Well, I don't know why they say that. I mean, nitro, what you're comparing it with, other nitros, or you can't compare nitro with electric, whatever you do, because it's not the same. It's like comparing electric cars and petrol cars. They're not the same, even though they pretty much do the same thing. But, is RC racing relevant in today's society? Well, yes. It doesn't matter if it's engine powered or electric. I'm not going to get into details of running your nitro and where you can run it and where you can run your electric. That's not what it's about. But you can run your nitro pretty much anywhere if you find a suitable place. I'm not saying you should run it in the street with people, kids, and houses. Of course, that maybe that was done years ago, but I never did that anyway. I always took it to a place where it was out of the way. But nitros are not a turnkey type of RC solution. This has sort of battled me, but that's what I find that I like about running nitros. Of course, don't get me wrong. I mean, you take it to somewhere to run, it doesn't work. It is a pain in the ass. The same could happen for electric cars, of course, but it's less likely to be a problem. Now, I'm not saying that if I travelled an hour down the road and this didn't work, I'd be well pissed. But I'd probably take more provisions with me in case that did happen. Maybe I would take either another nitro or a different electric RC car. I don't know. But fortunately, where I go with this, I can walk to, so it's not much of a problem. But the fact that it didn't run, and I wouldn't say wasted an hour of my life because it was a nice day. I like trying to run these old vintage nitros. Of course, again, you can buy, and it seems like at the moment, like Team Associated for one, and I think HPI are bringing out like new nitros. You can buy them, put a fuel in, start them up, run them in, and run them, and that's the whole point. So, of course, there are easier routes even with nitro. But anyway, this channel and what I tend to do is about rekindling old nitros. I don't necessarily think it's always going to work, but the challenges that I face, I try and portray over to people that perhaps haven't run a nitro, or they have old nitros, and rather than just getting rid of them, do something about it. Because I don't know, there's quite a lot of fun and knowledge to be had and found if trying to diagnose nitro problems from older cars and engines. Again, sometimes you'll get an engine that's old, it's absolutely knackered, you can't do nothing with it. So, it is a bit of a lottery, if you like. But going back to what I originally was saying, there was a lot wrong with this engine, if I'm honest. Even what didn't look like much when I built it. However, a couple of the problems were down to me as I rebuilt the centre diff, which created a problem, with the clutch bell. Um, and the exhaust gasket was probably knackered anyway, and the leaks was probably still there. You've also got the bearings to consider. That's the problem. I haven't got new bearings in it, but that is the problem when you buy these old engines anyway. But onwards and upwards. At the time of recording, I'm still waiting for the exhaust seal, but it will go on, and we'll get it back into the chassis, and we're going to see if it will actually start a bit easier because it's got compression. It is clean. All the carb seals that are in the needles are sealing. Um, you could is that bottom seal with the carb neck, if you like, it is split, but it does seat in. Is that a problem? I'll have to I'll see. I mean, I'll find out. I mean, might even have to try and buy some O-rings, those little thin ones, but I don't know where you're going to get them from. They're not going to be automotive. I don't think anything's that finite, if you like. But anyway, uh, let's get it back into the car, and I don't know. We'll see if it starts.
Right, we'll start off on the right foot. New. Well, that's the old one. Look, it's like, so that's where it's split. Probably still would have been alright, but the proof, as they say, is in the pudding. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put the engine in, and then I'm going to turn it over without the plug-in, because I felt that it was struggling pulling fuel up. There's a bit of fuel left in there. I think it's cleaned out, so when turning the roto start, which has got a new battery in it, and possibly, I don't know, you can probably choke the exhaust up like this. It should pull fuel in a lot easier. So I'm not going to hold much hope up, but apart from putting new bearings in and stuff like that, there's not much else I can do. Right, let me just put the engine back in. Right, so it seemed to prime. So I'll put this back in. Put the plug back in. Make sure that's tight. Right, we'll turn it on. I'll put the air cleaner on. You never quite know, do you? You never know. So I'm going to put that in there. Glow plug on. So just primed.
So after all this jiggery pokery, it's taken hours, probably about 3 days to decipher this. Although it's probably I'll blame myself a little bit. I'm trying to sort of Heath Robinson things together. The clutch, when I rebuilt the clutch, because the spring had come off and it was flaying around inside the bell with one of the posts coming out the flywheel. That wasn't, I wouldn't say it was loose, but it wasn't out. But because I kept doing it the other day, and as you see in the video, sort of, I haven't shown you all the video because it went on forever. But what has actually happened is the spring had got all mashed up around all the shoes, and the flywheel standoff, the post which the shoes should slide on, that had actually come out and rattled inside where it would have been in the flywheel and basically knackered it. And transpires that when you're trying to start the engine, it's sort of dragging it all over, so it's not actually free turning the engine, so it's restricted. I should have known that. I don't know why I didn't think of that, but the thing is, it was running before on the airfield, and that's with the clutch a little bit icky. Anyway, change the clutch, bell, flywheel, shoes. They're not the same that fit. They're from the same engine, different engine, the same make. That fake false engine wasn't as straightforward. The shaft that comes out from the crankshaft is different. Even though it looks like it's a .21 engine, and from first look it's the same. However, it was a bit of a mission. By this time, I hadn't lost interest, but I was getting because it is mucky, it's fiddly, one dead end after another, and you start to then think, what is it? Is it my own ability not to build engines? What is going on? I've never had this much problem, but I think the long and short of it is any nitro, any second-hand nitro that you buy, you've got to make sure that things are correct. And I know that sounds really obvious, but you try and sort of cut corners here and there and think, oh, that'll do. In fact, when I first built this engine, I actually thought it was fine. I thought the clutch felt fine, but lo and behold, it wasn't. So long and short of it, it's sort of back together. It's in the chassis. There's just 2 screws I've got to put in the chassis to keep the engine plate where it is. I haven't done those just yet, but let's have a look now at when we try and start it.
Let's see.
Well, I can't believe it started. You won't believe how pleased I am with that. Normally, I don't get that much problems starting nitros from unless they're completely knackered, then there's no chance. But when all the tick boxes are ticked, there's only so much you can do. But it was all there, compression, it was drawing, it was not leaking now when I've sealed it. It was great. So it transpired that yes, the ball ache of the clutch, blah blah blah. But I don't think these force engines are particularly well, these type ones nevertheless are particularly good. I think they're okay, but it's surprising where I bought a batch of them, as I said, and from .28 to .21. So the engine block's the same. It's like the fins and maybe the bore size. Even I don't know if the sleeves even different. But what is surprising is all the engine from like the back to the bit that sticks out the front. So you've got the back plate part and that bit of the crank, whether it be a rotor start, pull start, or nothing, blank, like just a normal box start. And the other end, the clutch end, depends on what sticks out and how much to what's on there. There's that's the bit that varies. I know the stroke can vary, but that's the bit I was having trouble with. So the bit at the front, trying to sort of shoehorn together a clutch that would work. Anyway, we've done it. It is revving on off throttle, so it revs up, and as you let go of the throttle, it goes. So my understanding, it's drawing air from somewhere. It could be where the carb might be a bit slow shutting, so I've got a spring I'm going to put on there just to try it, and then it'll probably want a little bit of a tune. It could be drawing air from maybe that seal near the bottom of the carb, so that's something I'll need to look at. It could be even drawing air from any one of those orifices within that engine. But anyway, I'm really pleased, and we're going to get out now, and we're going to get it, at least get it running, and we'll see how it performs. Also got a weird feeling that I've got the front hubs carriers, they're on the wrong way round. It's got positive caster or negative. Which way is it? Why don't I know that? So the kingpins are leaning forward, or the bottom of the kingpin is back. I don't think it should be like that. I think they've got to be swapped round based on the last turbo burns that I was rebuilding. So it won't stop it from running, but we'll see. So let's get out there and we'll give it a go.
So it dies when you open the throttle. So I don't know why. Morning.
So the reason I'm revving it like that is that when you leave the throttle on, it just cuts. So I was working on the mid-range. Seemed better as I was fiddling around with it.
It's going slightly better, but still won't rev. Slightly better. What's the better it's gone today so far? It still won't rev. Bit better. Definitely needs tuning. I think that front disc is a bit loose. Bit of revs there. The carb's playing up, isn't it? Oh, it's out of fuel. I think it's out of fuel.
Finally, there you go. So we did get it out and get it running. Wasn't without its trials and tribulations, as you would with any old Nitro, or your rebuilt one. This isn't a, it's not an original with the engine, what have you, but it is that sort of Asman's, like what they use is the Force engine, 0.21, and it towards the end of the video, it got to the point where it started to run better. I've got one of these engines in another Nitro, an MP6, and it did exactly the same thing where it would rev and go burr, burr. I did read up that that's, I don't know, I'm trying to think, too rich. But eventually, as I got running out of nitros, I took a whole bottle with me, one of the nitro bottles, not the big ones that you buy, but the ones that you would squeeze it into the tank. And I'd run out. But bearing in mind, I had used it to start up at home and one thing another, and I did a lot of piss arsing around with the carburetor off camera to get it to run without the body shell on, and I wasn't having much luck. Well, I still don't really know. Towards the end, it run better. It revved. It allowed it to rev to maintain pace and speed, but it was still dying off a little bit. So, but it was very minute adjustments on that carb. I don't think the carbs on these engines are particularly good, but it's difficult. It's difficult to know what to do when it does so many different things. It started to rev. When you have the car idling, it all of a sudden it draw air from somewhere. So that's clearly an issue. But it was quite nice to see an old vintage Nitro running, and being used. When it was going towards the end, it was going quite well. Wasn't nowhere near where it should be doing, but it's considering I don't get to take my nitros out as often as I'd like to. But from looking back, and maybe the front diff was a bit too free than the back one, because it was sort of pulling itself along, which wasn't a bad thing. I don't know whether something else was slipping within the drivetrain, because there was occasions when it didn't feel like the clutch was engaging. We'll sort of investigate on that. So we finished up with a combination of adjusting the throttle stop, coupled with the trim. I think the low speed idle screw seemed to be in its optimal place. I don't know, it might still need a bit more adjustment. And the high speed needle was just getting there. So I think I can go in another barely eighth of a turn to get it to perhaps rev a little bit more. It's running on 25% nitro, which I don't know whether that's the correct thing. From the bigger displacement engines, I don't know, was it 0.18 onwards? Do they not run slightly higher octane, more nitro? I don't know. I can't recall, but I did read somewhere that 0.21 and 0.28 Asman engines need the higher 25%, but they will run on lower. But at that point, when I was trying to run it on 16%, which is my sort of go-to, it wasn't running, but that was for another reason. So it takes a lot of effort. This video is quite long, so it's all about the talk and the build up to what is effectively still a bit of a. It's not a fail, but it could have done with being a little bit more longer. I was actually doing this running video before I started work this morning, so I had a bit of time. So I thought this is the ideal time to get down there when there's when it's not that busy. But there's a picture there, as you can see. This is me messing around in the dust. It definitely would be a lot quicker, and if I could open the throttle more, I'll perhaps look into that. But these engines, these particular engines, seem to suffer from that. I say that it's probably me and my tuning, because the other one was doing the same, and that's a 0.28. But yeah, super impressed. I like it. It's quite heavy for what it is. So lugging it over in the rucksack, because I have to walk probably quarter of a mile where I park to get to where I am. Normally I'm running, but then it's not so bad with the dog. But with the backpack on, it was quite warm and sunny. It's quite heavy when you load the backpack up with everything. I felt like I was on some sort of mission to get to cross the country or something, but we did it finally. Another running video, few and far between, but we're getting there slowly. Just to proving that old vintage nitros take a lot of work, but if you put the effort in, you do get rewarded. Let me know what you think. You know, it's more so about the, the vintage side of it. 1989, 1991 too. It's somewhere around there. The engine's probably, to be honest, later, sort of late 90s. But we've got another video coming soon of a running part or startup procedure, nevertheless, of the other vintage turbo burns that I refurbished. This is a turbo burns. I've just taken the wing off and put like a burns body on to make it look a little bit more like a burns. The other one's a turbo burns with the wing. So look out for that one. Please, follow the channel, hit the notification bell if you'd like to be notified of perhaps when those videos will be out soon as it happens. But saying that, they've already been out, so you'd have seen them before this. I'm ahead of schedule here, so ignore that bit. But anyway, like and subscribe, and keep an eye out for the next video of my vintage Nitro Kyosho. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks very much, and bye for now.